Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for patiently waiting on us. I know our last town hall where we gave flow updates was a couple of months ago now. That was around about the time the Bio AI hackathon started, and obviously we finished that already now. Um, Thankfully, we were actually winners of some of the prizes, so we won I think 10 to 15K in prizes during that hackathon. And yeah, overall would say was a really successful initiative. It really pushed us to roll out some new features. And yeah, want to discuss and talk about them today with you all. So the first major update that we made, I think we mentioned this in the last town hall that we were planning to create this, but the ARI or ARI as we call it, otherwise known as the Research Wizard, essentially is a chatbot that we've added to Phlo. So it has full details on everything about your project. It's the first chatbot, like pure chatbot experience that we've added to Phlo. So we'll talk about that in a little moment. We also implemented a knowledge graph system to manage all of the information that's associated with your project. That will also help us to better serve your queries and integrate that knowledge with AI tools and new features that we add in the future. So this is a real like deep architecture play there. Um, the other thing is kind of like a manifestation of the knowledge graph on the user side, which is project logs. So this is a way for, I mean, knowledge graphs, if you've ever seen one, they're not really human friendly. They're not intuitive to read or navigate unless you're using like very specialized tools. Their purpose is very much rooted in maths and is obviously optimized for machines, not humans. So what we've done is create a more familiar experience that we're calling project logs that allows users to see and manage the knowledge graph details going in and coming out, but in a way that isn't too overwhelming for the user. And then finally, we've added this new technology components experience, which I'll do a deep dive into in just a sec. So first up, Ari, our research wizard. If in case you didn't see the town hall, Ari stands for Artificial Research Intelligence, ARI. And as I said, this is our pure chatbot experience where you have the flexibility to ask it pretty much any question about your project. Now, we didn't want something kind of like mimicking what people are already doing with ChatGPT. I know a lot of people already have subscriptions on ChatGPT or other AI tools that they use. We didn't want to mimic that experience by having people have to copy and paste information and give a bunch of detailed context. We wanted it to feel seamless and fluid so that at any moment you could pull up this assistant, ask it a question on what you're seeing on the page, and it will actually already know what you're looking at. So not only is it able to know what you're looking at and answer your question, it can also search the knowledge graph and all of the project details to really deeply understand the query that you're asking and find the relevant information to be able to answer it accurately. And so it kind of works in using, I think, three agents. The first agent is what we call the manager agent. This one basically takes your query and generates a series of tasks that then get distributed to individual agents. So in this case, you can see the question here. It's about swarm coordination algorithms. So what the manager agent will do is break that up into individual requests. So it will identify what parts of the project do I need to look at in order to answer this question, uh, and it would basically assign tasks to those individual agents to answer those questions independently. Then the second step is obviously those agents going off and completing those tasks, completing those requests. They return that information back to the final agent, which is what we call the synthesis agent. And this takes all of those, the results from those requests and synthesizes it into one single coherent response. So the first iteration of this we did with our own kind of architecture. The second iteration we actually implemented with the knowledge graph or integrated it with the knowledge graph, sorry. That unfortunately was resulting in some slight inaccuracies in the answers that it was giving. So we noticed that the performance had actually gone down from our first iteration. Um, However, on the flip side, the speed of response was much, much faster. So, it's a bit of a balancing act. So we decided to roll back to the first version while we debug and try to figure out how we can optimize the knowledge graph version so we can get the best of both worlds, speed and quality of response. But yeah, we did some extensive testing on the first version, and I have to say I'm really happy with it. It does everything that we intended it to do, and I think users will find it really useful whilst going through some of the longer, more complicated steps. So yeah, I told you knowledge graphs weren't really very human friendly, and here's a screenshot of not even a whole knowledge graph. This is a screenshot of one subgraph within a knowledge graph for one single project. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of nodes. Each of those nodes is connected to hundreds, if not thousands, of other nodes. There's relationships between all of them. They each have metadata associated with them. So they're really just not an intuitive thing to interact with as a human. But having all of this information organized in this way does make it really easy for us to not only store and pull out and retrieve information that is relevant, but actually give better quality answers to the requests you're making. So in the case where you might be using the tech de-risking workflows, we can actually provide better context to the AI in the first place, to be able to answer your questions more accurately and specifically. So, yeah, we've really just not even scratched the surface of what we can do with this, but I think it's a really foundational pillar of the architecture going forwards, because pretty much every new feature that we add to the platform can plug into this, and this kind of acts like the glue that harmonizes and brings them all together. So yeah, we'll be updating obviously the community on how this goes, and exploring new ways in which this can be useful to the users. The next thing, as mentioned, was the project logs. So we really took inspiration from I think Google tool suites. You could see that even reflected in some of the design choices, purely because the way in which they handled it is very simple, minimalistic, um, but really serves the purpose of keeping the user informed and updated as to what's happening on the back end. So it's kind of like this window into what changes are being made to a database. Like for example, in the case of Google Drive, when you upload files or you delete files, or you move files, you have these logs and you can see what's happening on the back end, even though that's not particularly, that's not a process that you usually have eyes on. It's happening in the background. So yeah, what we've got here in the logs is, so we have insights. These are basically any pieces of information, loose pieces of information that are saved to your project. So things like you might conduct some research and find out that enzyme A costs $5 per gram. That would be an insight that gets saved to your project. It's not specific to your project necessarily. Like you might choose not to use enzyme A, but it's an insight that you've learned during your journey. And so we want to save it because it might become useful later. Then we have general events. So this is things like when you create a new project, or you create a new, or you add a new contributor, maybe you delete something that was stored. All of these events are logged, and you can just see those and track changes. You have new variables created. So variables are the things that are specific to your project. So in the case where you're looking at 3 enzymes, A, B, and C, but you decide you're going to go with enzyme B, then enzyme B is actually what will get saved as a variable to your project, because we need to know, obviously, that that's the enzyme you're using, and that's an important component of your research. Whereas enzymes A and B would get saved as events, as in the event would say, yeah, we didn't choose those ones, but also saved it as an insight because maybe there's a specific reason why we didn't choose those enzymes. But the most interesting part is this contradictions. So what happens is every time you add new information or make changes to your project on Phlo, we're actually able to consolidate that with the knowledge graph and the information we already have stored, and flag any contradictions that may occur. So maybe you choose a specific process that is expensive when you've already said from the beginning that your goal is to keep the process inexpensive and accessible. So we can actually warn you whenever you're making decisions that will drive up that cost. And, cost is just one example of where contradictions become relevant. Um, Obviously, as a project manager or leader of an organization, you need to have awareness of these things at all times. And sometimes they're not immediately obvious. Sometimes they can end up costing you further down the line. So we want to be able to flag those when they happen. And then what it will also do is pause any AI or generative steps until you've resolved those contradictions. So it won't just tell you there's a contradiction, it will give you the opportunity to accept or reject them or make some key changes so that that there is no longer a contradiction. So we think this is also going to be super useful as projects spend longer on Flow, things get infinitely more complex. It's going to really provide operators a way to always have eyes on what is happening and the general direction they're heading in based on the choices they're making in real time. And then finally, we have technology components. So this one, we've been thinking for a long time about how we can really close the loop on the technology de-risking workflow. If you remember, or if you've used it yourself, you'll know that the technology de-risking workflow is essentially a linear process. You answer some questions, you conduct some literature reviews, and you get a report at the end. Now, that report does bring in all of those insights that you've learned along the way, but it kind of stops there. That's all you can get from it. There's no like a reiteration. There's no continuous development. And so this is something that since the beginning we've really wanted to address. And what we came up with is this components view. So once you've gone through that whole workflow, what will be generated? We use AI to basically digest what is the technology that you're building and what are the individual technological components that are required to make it up. And so we'll create these components. Each of them has their own kind of like page where there's a summary on what are those components, what do they do, what are maybe some of the claims that you're making if you're developing something new. This will be useful, obviously, for conducting a patent application. Actually, that's an important point. So we're formatting these exactly how a patent application would be formatted. So we're not just giving you like a dashboard or a homepage that summarizes the things that you're working on. We're actually giving you something that you can tangibly take away at the end and perhaps submit to a patent office once you're ready to do that. Um, and so what happens with these components is now you can individually go and modify or develop and de-risk each individual one. So in the case, let's say the first one, magnetic iron oxide integration for field deployment, I can go and hit this AI icon here. It will take me to the component page, and then I hit de-risk, and it basically starts the whole technology development workflow again. But instead of looking at the entire process or the entire technology I'm trying to develop, it's going to look exclusively and specifically at this individual component. So I can get really deep and granular with the research I'm doing to develop this new technology, because each of these is a piece of patentable intellectual property in theory, right? And so you might not succeed in your end goal to create an entire system that is composed of all these components, but you might develop some valuable IP along the way. And almost certainly, you're going to be tackling some very challenging technical problems along the way. And so we really wanted to give users the ability to use all of the innovative tools that we've developed, but in a way that will help them specifically when they're working in the lab, for example. So, um, yeah, it's you can actually, once you hit that de-risk button, you can actually update with the status of what you're working on. You can provide any specific challenges that you're having. So, things that you've been facing in the lab, or maybe some data that you've generated that points to certain outcomes that you would like to question. We can use all of that and do a new set of literature reviews. So you'll create a new set of next steps and a new set of research queries. And all of that will go back into the same process and go and research it all for you. And at the end of it, of course, you'll get an actionable report that you can then use to take back to the lab or take back to your research team and plan going forwards. So that's all for the new features that we've added in the last 2 months. The other thing to mention is that we ran a plant hack, or sorry, we partnered with the nucleate plant hack 2 weeks ago now. Now, if you saw any of the announcements or posts, the intention was that we were going to provide a demo version of Phlo for the hackathon participants to use and develop their projects. Unfortunately, we ran into some major bugs in the morning of the event and we were unable to fix it in time. So we weren't able to have participants actually use Phlo. So what we did instead is that we launched an online continuation of the hackathon. And we had 8 teams register for that. They were using Phlo and developing their projects. Actually, the dates on here say 7th to the 14th. We extended that to tomorrow. So actually, this will end and we'll have a judging panel tomorrow to decide who's going to be the winner of the grand prize. During this process, we've been collecting comprehensive feedback from all participants. So that is a mixture of quantitative and qualitative data on the performance of different features on Phlo and how people are receiving or responding to them, so that we can obviously take that and make it even better than it already is. And then the final thing to say is that we're doing a feature freeze. So we've been building Phlo for 6 months now without pause. And whilst that's been great for progress and we've obviously got a lot done, it does mean that we have at times rushed or brushed over things. And so what we'd like to do now for the next 2 to 3 weeks is actually stop building new things and going back over everything that we've built, reviewing the current architecture, and making important optimizations to reduce cost, latency, and improve the overall performance of the platform. So if you see, or if you don't see any major updates from us in the next few weeks, don't panic. We are still hard at work, but yeah, we're not going to be building anything new for the time being, so we can improve what we already have. So, as always, if you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, even, feel free to reach out to us on socials or within the Discord server. We're always open to suggestions, and we really want Phlo to be a product built for and by the community. So, if you're interested in trying it out and giving us some more comprehensive feedback, then don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you for listening.